Good morning, everyone. I'm Eduardo, one of the BrELT moderators. We're here this morning to listen to a fantastic professional. I have the pleasure to work with her. Not on a daily basis, unfortunately, but who knows, one day, right? Catarina Pontes is an academic coordinator at Associação Cultura Inglesa, São Paulo. She's a Delta holder, and she's been involved with English language teaching training, course designer, and international exams for several years. She's an ICELT tutor, has contributed to IATEFL publications, and presented at international conferences. Right, Kata, many international conferences.
Yes.
She's the current president of Braz-TESOL São Paulo chapter, and the incoming coordinator of IATEFL's pronunciation SIG. Catarina is also the co-author of Getting into Teacher Education. So without further ado, I'll hear Catarina Pontes.
Thank you, Edu. Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Great to be here taking part in BrELT's Pronunciation Week. It's a pleasure to share a little bit of what I know with you today. So let's get started. Let me just get the presentation here. Is it showing, Edu? Just to check. All right. So I'll be talking, it was very hard to come to 5 reasons only why we should include pronunciation in our lessons. There are many more, and but I will try to focus on 5 only today. We can always continue the discussion online or face-to-face if you like, but today we'll focus on 5 only. In my experience, and I believe it's the experience of many teachers out there, many learners come to us saying they want to improve their speaking skills. They want to do conversation lessons. And I think you've listened to this a couple of times before, right? When it comes to speaking, many times they claim they lack vocabulary. Sometimes they complain about grammar, not knowing enough grammar to communicate, but they tend to focus on pronunciation. They may say they may not know exactly how to pronounce words, or they may not exactly understand what people say. So pronunciation definitely has to be in our lessons. Now, in my experience as a teacher trainer, many teachers will refrain from covering pronunciation in their lessons for some reasons. One of the reasons is that there is a claim there is not enough time in the lesson to teach pronunciation. And I'd like to try and convince you that pronunciation can happen at any given moment in your lesson. You don't need to have a full lesson focusing on pronunciation, though you can, of course, but you don't have to. When you're teaching grammar, vocabulary, when you are doing skills work, pronunciation can be present there, right? The other reason is that the most frequent reason, I would say, and because I have been teaching a pronunciation course for teachers for a while now, many teachers tell me, they have told me that they lack enough knowledge about the system to teach pronunciation to their learners. So by grasping a few concepts, by referring to some of the literature, you can be prepared to tackle some of the issues that might come up in the lesson, right? I included this information here, which is from a document, from the PISA document covering global competence. And when you think about what learners need to achieve in terms of global competence to communicate well when interacting in English, we have something that is sort of similar to the CASA framework, which is development for teachers, but here we are focusing on learners. We have main areas here being knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values, and what learners should be able to do in order to interact better. I have included the definition from this website here as well, from the PISA Global Competence. The QR code is here as well, which can direct you straight to the website if you want. And the definition that I got from the website says that it's the capacity to examine local, global, and intercultural issues, to understand and appreciate perspectives and worldviews of others. So broadening learners' horizons in terms of communication and competence in English. Something else I have included here before we start focusing on the 5 reasons why we should include pronunciation in our lessons is a link to the most recent version of the Common European Framework of Reference. There has been a review to the document. This is the provisional edition. It was launched last year in September. They're still working on this, so there was a soft launch to the document. And I would like to thank Alberto Costa for sharing the document with us very recently in our event here at Cultura. So in this document, what I found most interesting was that there is a reference to a plurilingual competence in English, which is for us teachers to become more aware of, and then for teachers to help learners become aware of competences that are important when working, when learning English, And of course, what caught my attention the most is the area when they're talking about phonology. And in this part here, phonology had been the least successful scale developed in the research behind the original descriptors. So more attention is being given to phonology in this document. So hooray, and let's start talking about the reasons. The link to the document is here as well. And if you go to the previous page, you have a QR code to the website as well. All right. First reason, of course, that I chose here is that pronunciation work helps improve speaking skills. When you think about the work you can do in the classroom, we can help learners become more aware of features that will help them, of course, to communicate better. I have a very tiny, short snippet here from this TV series, Modern Family, in which you see how sometimes mispronouncing a word can be a problem. Let me show you the snippet and we'll talk about it in a second.
Hey, Jay. Hi. How are you? Hi, Gloria. How are you? Oh, a beautiful dress.
I thank you, Phil.
Okay.
So she says Phil, not feel.
Huh.
Right, so here, the issue was with the mispronunciation of something that you might have drilled many times in your lesson before, short and long E sounds, right? The focus here being on segmentals. When you're talking about phonology, we break it roughly into segmental phonology and suprasegmental phonology. When you talk about segmentals, we are talking about the individual sounds in English, right? And when we are doing work with segmental phonology, most times the most frequent type of activity we do is drilling with minimal pairs. It is absolutely fine to do it, to do drilling, but it's always very important for us to think about the context for this drilling practice, right? How relevant it is in the classroom. So just simply drilling loose words or loose sentences, if you like, without a context may not be as meaningful to learners as you wish it were, right? There was a talk by Pamela Rogerson-Revelle at IATEFL in 2015 in which she talked about the frequency with which some minimal pairs occur in English and how likely they were to be misunderstood in everyday conversation. So when you are selecting the minimal pairs to work with, make sure you choose sounds that could actually cause communication problems, that could actually hinder or jeopardize communication. Think about your learner's first language, right? Most of the people, I believe, attending this talk today could be from Brazil. I'm not sure yet. Eduardo can tell me later. But most of the people watching now should be from Brazil. So we need to think about the sounds that could actually cause problems in communication. We should look at learners' difficulties and challenges faced in the classroom to help them overcome these and communicate better, right? So this is one thing that I'd like you to take into account. There are lots of books that provide excellent materials for you to work with drilling, but there are also different types of activities that you can do when working with segmentals. You can think about how you can help learners develop, for example, paraphrasing. So instead of simply drilling, they could choose from pairs of words and then explain those words. So they would be developing a strategy that is crucial for them to communicate in English when they are talking to people who don't speak their first language, so in ELF contexts, or when they are traveling abroad and they want to ask for something they don't know how to say, so they are explaining the word. So paraphrasing can be a strategy to help them communicate. As I mentioned before, when you're breaking phonology, you roughly break it into segmentals and suprasegmentals. When you're talking about suprasegmentals, segmentals is only individual sounds. Suprasegmentals, when you put sounds together and you have word stress, you have sentence stress, you have stress and rhythm, you have intonation and connected speech features. I don't know if you're familiar with this series. This is an oldie but goodie, as I like to say. This is a series produced by Aardman Animations, the producers of Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run, for example. And they have created this series with animals in the London Zoo. So they interviewed the animals, and they were asking how they felt about living in the zoo. And this is with an animal that came from Brazil and was living in the zoo, and he is sharing his experience. If you are a Brazilian Portuguese speaker, you will immediately identify this creature that speaks Portuguese from Brazil as well, though he's speaking English. And I want you to just watch the very beginning of this video and think about how you can perceive this person is Brazilian. Though the message is communicated fluently, you understand it's clear. It's not 100% accurate, but it's clearly communicated. Let's watch it, and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Sound running when you're ready.
Try to make you comfortable. They try to put you in a quite nice situation with standard food that look more like a dog food than food proper for wild animals. All right. If you try to compare the situations and the environment that you live here with the environment that you live in Brazil, there is a big difference. Here, you live in a very small place with all the technological advances possible. You have everything sorted out, double glazing, you know, your heating and everything in Brazil, but you don't have space. In Brazil, you have space, although you don't have all this technological, you know, double glaze and things like that, and you know.
Right. So when we watch this creature talking, we can notice some features, right, of his speech that can give away that he is not a native speaker, but a fluent speaker of English. And you can find his identity in his intonation, which is absolutely fine. But we can help learners to sound more natural. And then in my understanding, in my belief, actually, as a teacher trainer and a teacher, I'm not having my students aim at sounding native, but sounding natural, sounding intelligible, sounding clear, and communicating their message with as much accuracy as possible, of course, but helping them to get a message across, right? When I mention here sounding more natural, that's the idea that I have in mind, right? Putting less strain on the listener and avoiding misunderstandings, and of course, raising awareness of cultural aspects. I understand there has been quite a lot of discussion and a lot of debate on the issue of native, non-native teachers. I don't want to get into this debate here. I'm going to mention some features, of course, of native speaker English, because that's where the language came from, of course. But I believe it's important for learners to be aware of the message they want to convey. And if they do tell you that they want to sound British, American, or Canadian, or whichever other variety of English they want to sound, is to understand, first of all, why they want to do so, is to help them understand that accent is very closely connected, of course, with identity, and that if they want to sound British or American, it is important for them to know, of course, that there are hundreds of varieties of British, American, and other first speaker varieties of English, right? And I will get there very soon. So my point here is, how can we help learners sound more natural instead of focusing on sounding like a native speaker? So sounding proficient, that's my point here, all right? Of course, we cannot talk about pronunciation without talking about listening skills, about developing listening skills, right? Many times, I believe learners have told you, just like they have told me when I was teaching, that listening to English is quite a challenge. Their affective filter goes way up when they are doing a listening practice in class. And they many times block when doing an activity in class, because they would tell you that it's too fast, it's hard to understand, native speakers speak all together, and sometimes they might forget that speakers in their first language might do the same. So in my experience as a Brazilian Portuguese speaker, this can happen many times depending on the region the person is from, or the way the person speaks, actually. So sometimes it's not exactly the region where the person is from, but it's about the personality, right? They may speak too fast. I know I can't speak too fast. So it's important to raise awareness of their mother language too, right? Richard Caldwell, who's written Phonology for Listening, and he's about to launch his second book very, very soon, does fantastic work with decoding listening extracts. And you should check his website, Listening Cherries. And he has a fantastic app that goes with the book as well. I can give you the reference at the end of the talk, of course. And he breaks down listening, and he has a fantastic analogy with the garden, the greenhouse, and the jungle when he's comparing sounds in isolation, words in citation form, careful speech, and speech delivery, just like now, just like the way I'm speaking, and what can happen with word boundaries and sounds when speaking English, right? So trying to summarize the challenges that learners can face in class include the rate of delivery, so how fast or how slow somebody speaks and how this impacts communication, the different individual sounds that are present in different languages. So of course, I'm referring more to Brazilian Portuguese here, which is the language I speak as a first language. But of course, different languages bring different sounds. Some sounds are similar, some sounds are different. And instead of focusing on the different sounds many times, I believe we should cherish the similarities as well. So trying to focus on the sounds that are similar and trying to help learners feel more comfortable when doing listening in class is an important feature as well, right? And raising awareness of different accents. So instead of focusing or bringing materials that only focus on standard British English or standard American English, whichever they are nowadays, right? Because with the number of accents we have, this can be a challenge to find. But the mainstream accents, actually, we should try and provide learners with the opportunity to listen to a wider range of accents, not only native speakers, but also fluent speakers, as I mentioned before. So we have a world of opportunities. We have a wide range of materials out there with the internet nowadays, so we can choose from a wide selection and help learners to be more familiar with different accents in class and out of class, of course, with the suggestions of materials for them to do extra work. When you think about songs, many times learners can sing lyrics in a funny way, in a different way. And again, this happens in the mother tongue as well. So when I found this picture here that illustrates a mondegreen. I don't know if you have heard the word mondegreen before, but it refers to a mishearing. So when you see here, Lucy in disguise with diamonds instead of Lucy in the sky with diamonds, it's an example of a mondegreen. And there is a link down here to an article from the New Yorker talking about the science behind misheard lyrics, which is called mondegreens. This is also another way to help learners become more aware of connected speech in class. And Mark Hancock on his website, hancockmcdonald.com, has some suggestions of activities for you to work with missed transcripts in class in a way to help learners understand that many times what they misheard was not exactly what was said, but it was close enough. So it's in a fun and engaging way to help them understand why they misheard the lyrics because of the changes in sounds that can happen when you're talking about connected speech. There are some websites that I have seen as well, which bring a list of famous mondegreens from many songs. And again, this happens in Portuguese with many songs that I'm sure are coming to mind now as you listen to me, right? So this is a way that you can help learners develop listening skills by sometimes getting these mistakes, analyzing them, and showing why that was misheard, right? So Lucy in disguise, so the disguise, the "d" sound, a mispronunciation of the "th" spelling when it's a voiced TH sound, as in the sky. So just this kind of work can help learners to develop listening skills, right? Another suggested activity that you can do in class is to take advantage of scripts or texts that you have the audio for as well in your course books. I learned this activity with Jeff Strengths about 2 years ago, attending a talk he gave on working with teenagers and something we can do with scripts. So this is an example from a course book called Life Advanced by National Geographic. So there was a lesson. This is for advanced learners, but of course the activity can be adapted for any level. Here you have a text with somebody who attended a college, was then invited back to talk to freshman students. And I decided to focus on the first paragraph only, as you can see here, and ask learners to find all the T's in this paragraph. So that's why I decided to focus on the first paragraph only, because finding all the T's in the whole text would take forever, of course, right? So they had to find all the T's. I hope I have circled all of them in this paragraph. And then I would play the audio passage, which is right here, for them to listen and notice if the T's they found here were pronounced or not. So I'm not focusing on sounds that would be too different from their mother tongue, but the T, which also is present in Portuguese. That's the first part. Then the second part, actually, the first part is selecting, finding all the T's. Second step, listening to this part only and identifying whether the T was pronounced or not. If the T was not pronounced, I would ask them to cut them to cross them out from the extract here. I would then play it again. They would listen and identify how these T's were pronounced in this paragraph alone. So this can be an interesting way to focus on a way to help learners understand and do better in listening activities, finding the different ways the same letter can be pronounced in English. Another activity that you can do in a way to maximize the use of the same resource that you have is to ask them to focus, of course, not on all of these. I just selected these to illustrate the activity, of course, but to work on connected speech. So the red half circles here, if you like, show some linking sounds and different types of linking sounds that are present. We have features of liaison, we have catenation, so liaison here with an intrusive wa, we have catenation here, consonant vowel linking, and the same here. We have a linking R here, you're enjoying. You have an intrusive ya here, by everything. We have examples of elision when you have the green little bars here, if you like, crossing out the sounds that are not pronounced when you listen to this passage. And you have some examples of contractions with the blue rectangles here. So of course you could choose one of these features to focus on, have learners listen to the passage, which is here, to the extract, sorry, which is here, and then identify what happens, and then with them analyze why this happened, what the features are, etc. I believe that depending on the level of learners here, you don't need to name what happens. You can just refer to whichever linking sound you have here as a linking sound. I think that's information enough. There's enough information, sorry. But if depending on the level of learners, or if you're doing teacher training, you can of course refer to the jargon that you have here. So again, this could be another way to help learners develop their listening skills. All right. Pronunciation work in class should aim at helping learners become more aware of varieties of English, as I mentioned before. And then I found this quite interesting. It's common knowledge that the Scottish accent can be challenging. And I found this in the newspaper last year, which says that listening to a Scottish accent can cure stress, insomnia, and even mental health problems, says an expert. And it's almost maternal. Of course, here there is a fun aspect. It's quite tongue-in-cheek, this article here, but it's just a way to show that working with accents can be quite a lot of fun in class. Something I have started doing to help me in my teacher training sessions and in the pronunciation course for teachers that I teach is to have my own YouTube playlist, selecting different accents to work with teachers and help them first become more aware of these varieties so that they can help their students become more aware as well. There is, let me just go back a little. There is a video produced by BBC and CNN together in which an American reporter interviews a Scottish reporter. So the American reporter is from CNN. He is covering a golfing competition in St Andrews in Scotland, and he interviews a reporter from BBC Scotland, who's making it even harder for listeners for viewers actually in this case, to understand what he's saying by making his accent a bit stronger. And then the two of them talk about the Scottish accent and how the Americans feel about it. So it's an interesting video for you to see some of the features he describes. The title is Deciphering the Scottish Accent, and it's available on YouTube. This video here was suggested by a friend of mine here at Cultura, and it's a commercial by an airline from New Zealand. I don't know if you have seen before, but I'll just show you a part of it in which Santa Claus is receiving requests from kids to receive presents and how challenging it can be to understand the Kiwi accent. Let me show you just a part of it.
Hello, Santa speaking.
Hi, Santa. It's Eden.
Hello, Edim. And what would you like for Christmas?
I want a new beard.
Just to get this clear, you'd like a new beard. Okay, Edim. Remember to be nice. A new beard for Edim. Santa speaking. Puggy Bank. Right, Tom.
Puggy Bank for Tom from Tamaroo.
Santa speaking. Hello, Bin.
A biscuit ball for Bin.
What sort of plane? An earplane for Windy. A book of magic trucks. Sounds like a good read. A bug screen TV.
All right. What the Father Christmas is going on here? Kids want bikes and tents and fidget spinners. Not airplanes.
Oh, it's happened again. I know who can help.
Cura, push.
We seem to be having some trouble with the Kiwi accent.
Understanding Kiwi is easy as. A's are E's, E's are I's, I's are U's, and O's are O's. O's are always O's, and U's are usually U's. But U's could also mean like all of U's. Like how come U's don't understand what I'm saying?
So it's not a bug screen TV.
Basketball, not biscuitball.
And piggy bank, not puggy bank. Book of magic tricks, not book of magic traps.
Whatever.
Maybe we'll take care of the calls and these presents.
All right, guys. So this is just to illustrate how one variety of English, which is not exactly very present in course books or in materials that you use on a very frequent basis, not daily basis for sure, can help learners to understand another variety. We have many learners who are traveling abroad more and more for different reasons. They are immigrating, they are studying abroad for some time, they are working abroad. So this shows the importance of working with a wider range of accents. And of course, it's a fun way to do so. Right? And again, if you want a list of suggested videos to work with, let me know. I'll give you my email at the end of the talk, and I can make it available with BrELT as well. All right. In a presentation by Mark Hancock again last year at IATEFL, we discussed the importance of accents quite a lot. And this is something that I also said in the plenary talk I did with Braz-TESOL and and BrELT and the teacher development and the PRONSEG last year at an event here in São Paulo. The first thing we need to be attentive to is to raise awareness of different accents. So we help learners to become more aware, to develop tolerance, and instead of saying, oh, they speak with this type of accent, that type of accent, that's too strong, that's too difficult, that's too hard to understand, or that's too different, helping them to see that the variety that accents we have in the English language is what adds beauty to it, right? Variety is the spice of life, as a dear friend of mine likes to say. And then with this tolerance to different accents, we help them build respect towards the differences, right? And we avoid getting into a discussion of saying this sounds this or that, just like it can happen many, many times when you're talking about the Portuguese language, the Brazilian Portuguese language, and then avoiding linguistic bias, avoiding linguicism, avoiding judgment, I would say, right? And going back to Mark's talk last year, he talked about 4 dimensions we can cover, we could aim at covering when you're talking about accents. He mentioned the space dimension. And here, I don't know if you have seen this commercial before. I'm not going to show you this one, but these 2 guys are Scottish again. They are inside an elevator. It's a voice-activated elevator, and they should say the floor to which they want to go, and they want to go to the 11th floor. This guy keeps saying 11, so the elevator doesn't recognize they want to go to the 11th floor because of the difference, the allophones here at the beginning of the word 11. So the space dimension will focus on some differences that can happen with individual sounds in different varieties of English. Another dimension is a social dimension to accents, and this, as you might know, is a representation of the glottal stop in English. So in some varieties of English, instead of saying water or water, they will say water. So this T is somehow swallowed, and I'm terrible at aiming at producing a glottal stop because I can't. So the glottal stop here refers to a social dimension, and in some social contexts, it's looked down on. So it's seen as a feature of pronunciation that is not seen exactly as standard, and it can be frowned upon. So that's what he mentioned here. He referred to as the social dimension of an accent. And I think as I mentioned these, you can try and link to your first language. So if you're Brazilian, which features of Brazilian Portuguese refer to the space dimension? So when you think about how the R is articulated in different varieties of Portuguese spoken in São Paulo, in Rio, in the Northeast, in the South, in the North of the country. So how are these articulated differently? How is the R sound or the S sound articulated differently? The social dimension here, as I mentioned, sounds maybe mispronounced, I don't know, or pronounced differently, let's say, not mispronounced, but pronounced differently. How do they impact communication? The other dimension here is the time dimension. How have some sounds changed across time? How has pronunciation changed across time in terms of accent? Here I have a picture of David and Ben Crystal, father and son, and they have been doing some amazing work with OP, which is original pronunciation. And this refers to the pronunciation in Shakespeare's work, and how some lines made sense and rhymed in OP, and they may not rhyme in RP or in another variety of English. So you can also find some fantastic videos on YouTube with David and Ben reading extracts of Shakespeare's work, David reading in OP, Ben reading, if I'm not mistaken, in RP, and comparing the 2 versions and how it made sense in OP and how it may not rhyme in RP or any other variety of current English. So that's the time dimension, how accent has changed through time. And of course, we cannot forget to talk about English as a lingua franca, which is the other dimension Hancock mentioned in his talk. And students learning to speak with a locally appropriate accent, be it native or non-native, but locally appropriate, but they learn to understand and tolerate a wide variety of accents in addition to their own. And I don't want you to look at tolerate here with a negative connotation, but instead to help learners understand that it's not only two varieties. It's not only British American. It's not black and white. There are many, many shades of gray when you're talking about accents, right? So this is important to take into account as well. Once again, if you want to read more about the 4 dimensions of accents, if you go to Mark Hancock's and Annie MacDonald's website, hancockmacdonald.com, you go to talks, and the title of the talk was Accents, Are We Bothered? Instead of bothered with a TH, the spelling is double V on purpose. All right? So this is interesting read, of course, as well. Item number 4 here, reason number 4 actually, is pronunciation work can help us and our learners develop language awareness. Many times when you are reading a magazine in English, when you're reading the newspaper in English, if you're traveling inside an English-speaking country, you can see ads everywhere, and you can see how language play, word play is present in the English language, and that's one of the most beautiful things in English language, in my opinion. I have some examples here to show you. First, from a comic book from Popeye, and how phonology is present in this comic strip here. I thank a teacher from Cultura as well, from Mogi das Cruzes, who shared this with me in a training session a while ago. And I remember him mentioning that he saw somewhere that comic strips from Popeye comic strips were being banned in some schools because of the problematic, let's say, spelling, making it harder for kids who are learning to read and write, who are becoming literate, could have when reading this kind of comic strip. And again, we can relate to some comic strips in Portuguese as well that can have this kind of challenge for kids. When you read, for example, Cebolinha's comic strips, the R being replaced by the L, or Chico Bento with the São Paulo countryside kind of speaking that he has in his lines. But when you focus on the phonology here, if you look at this bit here, when Popeye asks, whose idea is it? So if you don't, you can notice the weak form here, the attempt at using an intrusive R here. Again, you've been running here, a weak you, and you have been running, full form turned into, you've been running into a very short form and weak form here. What can be tougher? So again, pronunciation being present here. And again, if you're not aware of the phonological features, you may not understand what is being said here. And looking at some ads from, or some language present in communication in English-speaking countries, I came across these 3. I saw these 2 here, and this one I found online. So when I saw this one, I was on the tube in London, and I saw this, and it took me a while for the penny to drop to understand what was being said. So you just, because first I read it, and then I read it aloud in my mind. I'd been away for a while, and then somebody who lived there told me that this candy hadn't been sold in a while. It was being sold again. It's a wafer candy. So that's how they were advertising the return of this to the market. This was a feedback form I got from a restaurant called the Slug and Lettuce. Not exactly the most interesting name for a restaurant, I would say, but it's a chain in the UK, and it's very good if you go there. So 4 ways to let us know, using the vegetable here in the name, and it would work in different varieties of English again. 4 ways to let us know, and to let us know what you think. And this one here, always look on the bright side of life. Bright side of life. So when you look at this bit here, preposition of being a weak form, and then somehow side of sounding like side here, life. So developing language awareness is crucial for teachers. It's extremely important to help learners to communicate better, to understand what is being said in spoken and written form. And of course, phonology plays a major role when you're thinking about English. So you as a teacher need to be exposed to this kind of material so that you help learners become more aware of language in different ways. Last but not least, of course, working with pronunciation is fun, I believe, and I hope you agree with me that there is a world out there that you can do to help learners see that doing pronunciation work in class can bring lots of advantages. It can help them become better communicators in the language. It doesn't have to be massive, meaningless, boring drilling to help them achieve better pronunciation, right? As I mentioned before, there is a huge list of resources and materials you can use to make your lessons fun and to help learners see pronunciation work as fun. And then I have some suggestions here of things that can be done. I'll start with this because it might be the first one your eyes were attracted to. You might remember the song, "Sweet dreams are made of not cheese, but these." And then again, working with Mondegreens, as I mentioned earlier, can be a fun way to work with pronunciation in class. Most students like working with songs, and I believe there is much more we can do when it comes to using songs in class. So it's not only a gap fill or meaningless or just random gap fill. There are many things that can be done. So working with Mondegreens is one of them. You might have heard of a website called lyricstraining.com, where learners can choose the song they want to listen to and the level of the challenge they want to cope with when doing the activity with the song. So they can choose different levels. They listen to the song and they type the missing lyrics as they listen. If they type something wrong, the song is paused. If they don't listen to that, they can go back and play again. So it's another way to work with songs and develop listening skills in a fun way in class or out of class, because this can be for self-study as well. Using questionnaire rods is another interesting way to add fun to the lesson. You can use the tiny rods to work on segmentals. So you can choose different sounds to work with minimal pairs and helping learners, or maybe more visual learners or kinesthetic, because they have to organize the rods as well, to cover different sounds and different features of the language. For example, connected speech as well. They can work with intonation. So you can use the rods. There are some suggestions in Adrian Underhill's Sound Foundations. Towards the end of the book, you can find some suggestions there to work with word stress, with syllable count, connected speech, individual sounds. So bringing a different type of material to class to add an element of fun to the lesson. This picture here represents something I particularly like to do with my learners and with teachers in the pronunciation course, which is voice recording. This can give you quite a lot of sense of progress in terms of pronunciation. The last project I did about 2 years ago was for teachers to start a portfolio in the course, at the very beginning of the course, recording their needs analysis. And then throughout the course, they were asked to record different samples, different extracts, of course, with different purposes. Some of the recordings were impromptu, so they had to think of things to say. Some were rehearsed, and then there was the comparison with these different types of delivery. In some of them, they had to record once without any explicit work on the target language. Then we would do some work, compare to a pre-recorded version from, a movie script, a TED Talk, or any other kind of recording. They would work on the features we were focusing on, let's say connected speech features or tone units, and then they would record again and compare the two samples. And this is something you can very easily do in your lessons. Not all learners need to have a mobile. You can have one mobile per pair, per group, depending on the activity you want to implement. You can decide if they want to make the recording available to you or if they just want to do it for self-study. They can delete the recording later if they don't want to make it available, if they don't want to share with anybody. But above all, this is a moment for self-awareness, for them to become more aware of how they sound, the features they are doing well. So it's not something them to spot mistakes only, but for them to focus on what is doing well, and for them to improve and to keep a record. If they don't want to use their own devices, they can use websites for that. So one that I can recommend is Vocaroo, vocaroo.com, vocaroo.com, where they can record a sample. It's stored in the clouds, whatever the clouds are. So it's cloud storage. Then the recording is turned into a web link, and this web link can be sent to you so you can listen to what they said and you can give feedback orally as well. So it's another way to do voice recording without using their mobiles. And something else that can be done, referring to Mark Hancock again, is to use mazes, for example. So this one focuses on ED endings, and specifically on the ED ending that sounds like t. And it's a maze, and they have to start here, of course, and get out here, finding only the ED endings that sound like t. So it's an interesting way to develop awareness too, and in a fun way. Follow-up work that you can do on this could be, because of the Lexis here, talking about an anecdote from a holiday trip, for example. They can think of a narrative and then they can record it as well. So you can have done some work with Cuisinart rods to do this, and then they can record. So you can sort of integrate these suggestions here. Something that some learners, mostly teenagers, I would say, I'll go back to this in a second, like to do is to work with memes. So this is a QR code that can go to a meme generator website. So you have a bank of images there, and they can type the message. So if you have been working, for example, with connected speech features, they can come to this website and generate their meme. This is one example. Where do astronaut fish go? Trouter space. So you can have the sequence of images there. You can pre-select the image, or learners can upload their own images and type the text, and the website will generate a meme. So I did this again in the course for teachers, in the pronunciation course for teachers, and they generated some memes and shared with the class, and it was quite fun. And going back here, working with young learners, storytelling is much better when you know how to play with your voice and the tone and the dramatic pauses. So doing this kind of work when you're doing storytelling can add beautifully to the lesson. So if you look at the story beforehand, prepare how you want to play with voice, play with tone, where you want to add emphasis, you will see that kids will be much more engaged if you are simply reading from the book, from the story cards, right? Engaging young learners with storytelling in this way will make a lot of difference to the lesson, right? These are just some of the reasons, so 5 reasons why I think you can and should include pronunciation to your lessons. This is a list, a very short list of references, some of the things I mentioned earlier. So Richard Caldwell's book here, when you're talking about listening, Underhill's here for the ideas on Cuisinart rods, the article that I mentioned before here, Mark Hancock's article on the accents that I mentioned as well, the text on Mondegreen's right here. Pronunciation Studio is a website that launches weekly articles on different features of pronunciation. You can subscribe to it and receive suggestions every week on how to improve your own pronunciation, on how to learn more about the system, and how to add ideas to your lesson. All right. Here's my email. If you want to contact me, if you want to ask for suggestions of further materials, websites, etc. And I believe that was it. Thank you very much. Let me see if there are questions here.
Kata, it was fantastic. It was really, really cool. I know things here, so I don't know if you can.
Great, very happy to take part. I do. Are there any questions, any comments?
Yes. Yes, there are questions and comments.
Okay, good.
So during the first second part, you mentioned the importance of using different accents.
Yes.
And is there any suggestion of a source where we can find this? The only thing I could think of was YouTube and YouTube videos, but is there any other website you would suggest?
To use different accents, you mean?
Yeah, perhaps a website in which we could find recordings or...
I can only think of YouTube, and there is Youglish. Is that Youglish, the new one? Youglish is a website on which you can type an extract that you would like to find. So, for example, you want to find people saying the idea of, or the idea of. You type this, and then it selects a list of YouTube videos in which this is said. And then you can listen to this. I'll just try to find it here as we talk. I think it's English.
From Via Guiar says that Elo has very interesting listening activities. You spell it E-L-L-L, 3 L's.
3 L's, okay.
Yeah. I've just checked it, and it stands for English Listening Lesson Library.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so I'm certainly gonna check that later. So thank you, Via, for the suggestion.
I'm sharing here the Youglish. Let me see if did it appear there? Do you have it? Youglish? Yes, youglish.com. That's the one I mentioned.
That's great. That's great example. Also, Via has a question here. She said she loved the way you presented.
Thank you. Who was that? Sorry, I didn't get the name. Sorry.
Via Guiar.
All right. Thank you, Via.
And her question is, where will you be giving other presentations? Because you're very knowledgeable and she likes your approach. So perhaps, do you deliver courses on pronunciation? So this would be...
Well, the next talks that I have will be at BrELT here in São Paulo. So there are 2 in the semester. So one will be the same presentation I did today, and the other one will be the one I'll be doing at IATEFL, which is one focusing on intonation. It's called Mind the Tone, the roles of intonation in everyday conversation. So it will be on intonation, it will be on pronunciation again, but focusing mainly on intonation.
Let's see, do we have another question? Via also asked if you know the website English Central. Do you know it?
No, not this one. Not this one. Can you share the link, please?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask her to
please, yes.
Then I'll share it with you.
Okay.
The following question is, what would be your opinion about practicing pronunciation with that website? But since you don't know it, I mean...
Yeah. Can you repeat the website, Edu, please? What's the name?
English Central, that's what she said.
I'm not sure I know it, but I'll check it and I can share on BrELT's page what I thought of it. I'm just sharing the one I mentioned about the Scottish accent, the deciphering Scottish accent here. So that's the title to the one I mentioned.
I have one more question.
Sure.
We'll leave it open to people watching on YouTube. I'm following the comments, so if you guys want to ask any questions, just type it on the chat box there, and I'll give it to Kata. But this is a question of mine. What should be evaluated when we're choosing course books? What should be evaluated when it comes to phonology and listening? How can we, see if this is an interesting course book? What are the key points we should be looking at when we evaluate course books?
What we should look at when evaluating course books. Is that your question? Yeah, because the connection is a bit weird here now. I think we should aim, Edu, nowadays at checking if the course book brings variety. And when I say variety, it's not only variety of native speakers of English, but also varieties of people speaking English from non-English speaking countries. It is very important for us to become aware, as I mentioned, of varieties of English, but also to inform learners that when speaking English nowadays, they will most of the time be speaking to people who don't speak English as a first language. So the more accustomed they are to listening to different Englishes, the better for them, right? We need to think about, we talk a lot about intelligibility, and we also need to ask ourselves as teachers, intelligible to whom? It's very easy for us to understand, not always very easy, but it's easier for us to understand what our learners mean in our lessons because we share the same first language. So most lessons in Brazil are in monolingual contexts, right? Most of them, not all, but most. So it is easier for us to understand. So when they travel abroad, or if they talk to people who come to Brazil who are from different countries, it is important to understand these differences and to be more aware of differences, right? And also in the lessons, it is very risky for us to say that this pronunciation is wrong. Of course, many things we know are wrong, but you also need to be more aware of the varieties, as I mentioned before. So I've never, a better answer nowadays would be, I haven't heard this pronunciation before. Let me check in which context this could be used, for example.
Yeah, instead of saying right or wrong, we don't say this, we don't say that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And chances are.
Yeah, and
yeah, and chances are that it's kind of weird because we prepare students to talk to native speakers, but chances are that they won't speak to native speakers at all. So we have,
they might, right? They might, but the chances are that they will be speaking much more frequently to non-native speakers, right? Yeah. And then again, what kind of English are we teaching? Yeah, exactly. And then when, for example, when they go abroad and they go to a fast food place, many times they will encounter somebody from another country, not from the US if they go there, or not from England if they go to England, for example. They will find somebody from any other country, and then the type of interaction that will happen, this first interaction, can be really unexpected, because they will not meet somebody who will say, good morning, how are you? What would you like today? No, it's for here to go, eat in or take out. So it is totally different, and with another accent. So it is, how much are we preparing them for real life? That's the question we need to have at the back of our minds all the time, right?
Fantastic. So, Kata, on Facebook, people were really, complimenting your presentation. That it was brilliant. So, do you guys need to have any other questions? Let me check if they have typed. So, people were saying it was great. Yeah, so I think.
Yes, no more questions.
No, I think they've all asked your questions. So.
No, if any other questions come up later or after watching the webinar, if they want to ask any other questions, just feel free to contact me.
Yeah, you're very active in BrELT, so.
Yes, I like to think so.
And you'll be able to answer the questions that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Kata, thank you very much. I would like to thank you on behalf of the moderation team. It's been really, really a pleasure. For those who are watching, tomorrow we have a webinar with Adrian Underhill.
Oh, great.
Yeah, he'll be talking about how pronunciation is in everything, even grammar. That's the title of his presentation. It will be at 5:30.
5:30 p.m. tomorrow?
5 p.m. tomorrow. 5 p.m.
5 p.m. Brazilian time.
Brazilian time, yes.
Okay, great.
On Saturday we have Gemma Archer.
Yeah. My dear friend Gemma.
Let's be talking about pronunciation assessment.
Yes. You can't miss it, guys. Gemma is great with pronunciation assessment, so you shouldn't miss it.
Yeah, it's going to be on Saturday at 2:00. And finally, on Sunday at 10 a.m., we have Thiago Veiga talking about pronunciation in the English as a lingua franca context. And right after Thiago at 11 a.m., we have Mark Hancock. So
great.
Really great. These are great opportunities.
Yeah, it's been, I'd like to congratulate you guys from BrELT, because it's been an amazing week. You have managed to cover many different aspects with pronunciation, which, of course, I'm biased, I know, but it's amazing. And I hope with this initiative, many more teachers feel more comfortable to teach pronunciation in their lessons and to be riskier when it comes to pronunciation. So don't be afraid, guys. Go there, be exposed to different materials, take a look at the suggestions you have been learning throughout the week and try in your lessons.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Everybody on YouTube, have a great day.
You too.
I'll see you around. Bye.
You too. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.